Welcome in to a State Fair edition. Sure. 2 days before kickoff edition of the Parent Despair podcast. I'm Justin Gard from The Fan. We've got Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune, Ryan Burns from GopherIllustrated.com. Here's one thing I don't want to hear from the Parent Despair audience, guys. We're presented by Jack's Cafe, jackscafe.com for your reservations. You can't say I'm not dedicated to this pod. Unlike Chip not wanting to go to Detroit, Burnsy, you're pretty dedicated. I am locked in for the people. We're 48 hours or so away from the 2024 football season. You can tell I'm in our utility shed here if you're watching on the YouTube channel. But I'm dedicated to this podcast. I'm dedicated to the Parent Despair audience, and I'm dedicated to the two of you. How's everything going, guys? We finally made it to game week.
We did. I'm just impressed that you found time and, more importantly, Wi-Fi connection at the Minnesota State Fair that's going to hopefully be consistent enough that we can do a podcast. Chipper, are you surprised as I am?
I've been in that booth where Garzi is, and he does have air conditioning. I'll say that. I borrowed.
Don't really need it today. Yesterday.
No, it's not bad today. But after those storms, nice and cool. But yeah, I'm ready. I mean, this is the best week of the year. One of them, right? The start of college football, the real start, not just a couple of games. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I got all the water out from the flash floods last night. We lost power in this booth on Friday. That was a State Fair first. The State Fair lost power, so we were off the air for a while. A portion of it. Ben Lieber's show on Channel 5 over here on the other side lost power. Apparently, there was a ride that was like mid-ride that lost power. Oh, no. Mainstream media won't tell you this. The fair has kept a tight lid on this. The fair embargo, they're very Deion Sanders and Jim Harbaugh-like. They control the message.
Boy.
So we'll go as long as we can here, but we wanted to get a preview episode out. The Gophers, of course, host North Carolina to start the season in just a couple of days, Thursday at Huntington Bank Stadium. Tickets still available for $30. Speaking of the State Fair special at gophersports.com. But I do want to start on a serious note with this pod before we preview the Carolina game and talk some other news and notes. Our guy, Casey O'Brien, made an announcement, I think, what day is this? Tuesday, on Monday night. And I know this announcement was coming for the last couple of days, but everybody who listens to this pod certainly knows Casey, who made national acclaim in 2019 when he played football for the Gophers and became their placeholder, and basically swept up the country with his story of resilience and hope and the row the boat energy and everything when it came to his dealing with cancer at that point for 5 or 6 years. He continues to deal with it. He's continued to deal with it. He's had a lot of remission and, unfortunately, a lot of tougher news and bad news. And he laid out on Monday night that the cancer is back. They found it in a couple of different spots. And the treatment plan that they are hoping to go forward with, which I know he feels optimistic about and his doctors feel optimistic about, is one that isn't covered by insurance. So no surprise. He said in the statement, I don't really ever ask anybody for anything, but I feel like I need to. And when I say no surprise, I mean the response has already been insane on his GoFundMe, which you can find, I know, on all of our Twitter handles. Gopher Football tweeted it out. As of this recording, I think it's at about like $150,000.
$170,000 now.
There you go. And this is 107 on Tuesday. So we're talking basically 18 hours, something like that. No surprise for a guy that's done so much for so many that there's so many people that want to jump in and help Casey with what he continues to battle with. But I know you guys have stuff to say, but I would encourage everybody to just hit that link, hit that GoFundMe. Yeah, if you can't donate, just retweet it, just like it, send it to your network, your friends, your family. But Casey, like I said, has done so much for so many different people, a lot that we haven't even really heard about, guys. Kids that have been battling cancer. We know about the wristbands that he wears for kids that wrote to him while he was going through his stuff. But you never want to see, cancer being back. And obviously we all want the best for Casey, and just hoping everybody can do what they can here to help out number 14.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction when I saw Casey's tweet was, man, life is really unfair sometimes. Yeah. I mean, you think about what he's already been dealt, the hand he's been dealt, and 7 times or 8 times that he's been, heard those terrible words that the cancer's back. And talk about a upbeat. I don't know that I could handle with as much grace and strength and positivity that Casey has throughout this whole thing. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to be there in 2019 at Rutgers when he got the hold. That was just an amazing scene, and talking to him and PJ afterwards, that was just an incredible thing. And we've all known his dad, OB, Dan O'Brien, for years. He was on the staff and high school coach now, just a a great family, and I hope people really step up and help Casey, because you mentioned it, the charity or the endeavor that he started for the Children's Hospital to raise $1 million. I mean, just think of all the good that he's done by sharing his battle publicly and in such a positive thing. So he needs help and support right now, and it's glad to see people are stepping up and helping him, because he really needs it.
Yeah, I don't know. I got too much more to add than what you guys have already said, but it's just been remarkable to see in just 16, 18 hours the amount of support that he's gotten, because to your guys' point, he has done so much for so many people, especially in the cancer community, and he's been a beacon of light. So I think we all are thinking of him. He's got a long road ahead of him once again, but I'm overwhelmed for him to see the amount of support that GoFundMe has had. So if you want to support that, you can just put Casey O'Brien GoFundMe into your Google machine, or you can find it on any of our social medias.
Yeah, give what you can, like I said, or just pass it around because it's obviously been shared a lot. And yeah, Chip, you mentioned the Team 1-4, where he wanted to basically revamp an entire floor at Masonic Children's Hospital for to make just make kids forget about what they're going through. And he spent time as a teenager at Masonic, and credits them with his attitude and his outlook and everything that comes with it. And you're right about his outlook, like as someone who's been around it now for a decade, like you hear about he's been having to go through scans every 3 months, every 6 months, and for a long time they might be clean, and you might think that you're out of the woods for a little bit, and then you get news that you don't want on one of the scans. And I know his attitude has always been like, all right, well, what's the plan then? Like, it's never been a woe is me. It's never been a why has this happened? It's always been, all right, well, let's just tell me what I need to do and we'll figure it out and we'll knock this thing out. And for 11 years, he's been doing that. So let's help him continue that. Go to any of our social media channels. Like Bernsey said, Google it. You'll find it. Very easy. They make it so easy to donate money now, which is great. And all of it's going to go to Casey in this treatment plan. And just keep the word out. Keep tweeting it, keep putting it on Insta, keep getting it out there, and let's help Casey just blow through this goal and get the treatment that he's ready to do. All right, let's get to the football of all things. It is game week. We've got a couple of days before North Carolina comes here to open up the 2024 season. Bernsey, I'll start with you on this one. What do you make of the fact that the betting line has shifted apparently from Gophers being a slight favorite to North Carolina now being a slight favorite as we sit here and hit record?
Well, it's the entire reason that for those of you watching us on YouTube, that Chip and I are now wearing Carolina blue today. For the record, this is a green shirt, but I can assure you we look like Carolina blue fans.
I know.
I'm the only one, Derek Burns, Rob Gagg, Dinkytown Athletes, baby. I'm fighting the good fight. This is my passive income to Dinkytown Athletes. All of you Gopher fans, hopefully see Darius Taylor carry it on Thursday. You're welcome with this Dinkytown Athletes hat that I have on, but go ahead.
Yeah. But I think it probably tells a little bit of a story about what Vegas, or at least the word behind the scenes, is in terms of Darius Taylor. Again, I think there's no doubt in my mind that Daniel Jackson plays. I know that Darius Taylor has practiced in the last week, but it comes down to where is he at health-wise. And I think for him, where are you going to be Wednesday night, Thursday, especially as you warm up, which could also be a rain game, which we'll get to with what this forecast looks like. So I don't know if it's just because people are paying more attention to it now in terms of just this game, because when it opened, Carolina was a 1.5 favorite, swung back to Minnesota at 2. I think now it's sitting at Carolina back at that 1.5 mark. Either way, I mean, whether you want to look at it as Minnesota slight favorite, North Carolina slight favorite, I think it probably tells the Darius Taylor story. But Chip, it's about as 50-50 as you're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a pick'em game to me, but I think that probably just the uncertainty of Darius Taylor and what his hamstring situation is. That would be my guess. No, this is I think both teams are probably looking at this game as a chance to get off to a hot start and figure out who they are and kind of what they're good at. And I was thinking about this today. I was going back through some of the numbers of the Gophers last year, and I'd forgotten this. And it's, we talk so much about their run defense and how they have to be better. I had forgotten that they were one of the worst third down defenses in college football last year. They went from top 5 to like bottom 5 in 1 year. I mean, they were giving up 46% conversions on third down. I mean, that is an area that absolutely has to get cleaned up, because you can't win many games doing that. So I'm curious to see what the defense is like. And then obviously the number one storyline is, Max Brosner and will this offense evolve and incorporate the pass? I'm writing my annual plea to PJ to open it up. But yeah, I went back and added them up. The last 3 years combined, there's only 3 teams in major college football that has thrown fewer passes combined.
Give us those service academies. Give us those service academies, Chipper.
Army, Navy, and Air Force. I mean, they have not averaged 200 yards passing in a season since 2019. 200 yards passing, there's typically between 95 and 105 teams that do it every year. It's not a very high bar to clear. They have not done it since 2019. They have to become more of a threat in the passing game.
Bernsey, I'm curious because Greg Harbaugh, I know at his press conference recently, I think the quote that stood out to you is that Max Brosmer is rolling right now. We've obviously all fallen victim to coaches and coordinators hyperbole in the month of August. It's kind of the season for all of that. What's your confidence level that he is in fact rolling and that we are going to see what everybody down there hopes that we're going to see on Thursday night? Because that is, I mean, we've been talking about it for 6 months. That is the biggest story is this quarterback good enough? Are they going to let him be good enough? What does that mean for everything else? We know about the defense. We'll probably talk about the defense, but everybody here at the fair is asking me, what do you know about Brosmer? What do you think about Brosmer? I say, I have no idea. I've seen him. I've been to 3 practices, and one of them he didn't do anything. And that's all by design, right? So what do we think? I mean, just give us kind of your last-minute thoughts on what we think we're going to see Thursday from their new quarterback, who they obviously put all their chips in with.
As long as it's not a driving rain, I think you're going to see him throw the ball 30 times. Now, I would also say we all think back to this time last year, the first 3 games. Athan chucked it 41 times, and then in that North Carolina game, the third one of the season, he also threw it 30 times. And then they figured out a quarter of the way through the season, we can't throw the football like the way we think we can. So then they scaled it back. So the hope would be Thursday night is the start of what is going to be the most pass attempts by a Gopher quarterback in the PJ Fleck era. I know that's behind the scenes, the drumbeat. Now that can and could change, certainly. But I think if Brosmer can just be consistent. Now, I'm surprised to hear that Chip doesn't have a project going on, considering Brad Johnson's kid is going to be likely the starting quarterback. I'm surprised there's not a Brad Johnson angle being written in now the Minnesota Star Tribune.
No, the Minnesota. Now, is he going to share it? I saw Pete Thamel over the weekend said that the other guy might get some series. It may just be a change-up kind of thing.
That's what he's been saying, Mac Brown. He's been saying they want to play a couple of different guys. Who knows?
I'm sure it'll be
well, if the other guy comes in that's not Max Johnson, he's going to be running the football.
He's going to run. Yeah.
He is the athletic one. Max Johnson's the throwing one. I mean, both these teams are so similar. You have transfer quarterbacks with the first name of Max, new defensive coordinators. I mean, you have running games that you want to lean on. You have defensive issues, but it's so much comes down to the quarterback position. Which Max is going to be better? Is it going to be Brosmer? Is it going to be Johnson? Because in that game last year, Minnesota shut down the running attack. And that's Omarion Hampton and the rest of those tailbacks under 3 yards a carry. And turns out in hindsight, that was a horrendous run defense.
Yeah.
So the question to me comes down to this. Minnesota's got 5 guys on their offensive line that are going to be starting that started games last year. North Carolina has 1 guy that has started a game before. They lost 4 starters, 3 to graduation, 1 to Ole Miss. And then defensively, Minnesota feels good about their defensive line. They shut down the run last year. But how does Minnesota look against that North Carolina front 7? To me, that's what this whole game comes down to is if Minnesota's as good in the trenches as we all think, I think you're going to see that, especially in the second half. But you just can't put yourself in a spot come halftime where you're down 17-7 or 21-10 because it gets so much more difficult to try and come back from that.
The other thing, Bernsey, and I know you've talked to some North Carolina people here in the last few weeks. People can read it at gopherillustrated.com. There's a bunch of podcasts as well. I know you joined your guys down there at 247. They were not good, North Carolina, at rushing the passer a year ago. And I remember going into that game, it was like, oh, they're going to get a lot of pressure. They're going to get after Athan because I think they had 9 or 10 sacks against South Carolina in one of the first game or second game. After that, they only had 19. And so if you're looking for like a good first opportunity for Brosmer under the lights in front of the most people that he's ever played against, with all the things that I'm sure he's feeling as a guy who's been waiting for this since December. You'd like to think, unless something has dramatically changed for North Carolina, and that's, I suppose, the key, right? That you hope it's the similar pass rush that they had a year ago where they're trying to figure it out and try to find it, and you can keep things somewhat clean for the new QB.
Well, they have a good speed rusher by the name of Kamon Rucker. Now, stop me if this at all sounds familiar to what Minnesota's got. Minnesota's got Ja Joyner. North Carolina's got Kamon Rucker. They don't feel great about their defensive tackles. Minnesota doesn't feel great about their defensive tackles. They have one stud linebacker in Power Eccles, which has got to be on the all-college football name team.
Yep.
And so does Minnesota with Cody Lindenberg. But then they have question marks alongside of him. They're very, very similar. And I think just which team, because we saw it last weekend, and this is the other thing I'm going to continue to stress to people here in this final 48 hours before the game. Think about the Georgia Tech Florida State game. Think about the Montana State comeback, the SMU comeback against Nevada. It's going to be weird the first 20, 30 minutes of this game because you have two brand new defensive coordinators that you don't know how they're going to scheme. You don't know how they're going to use their personnel. No one has tape on one another. So as this game continues to go on, you're going to find out more and more about who these teams are. But it wouldn't shock me at all, Chipper, to see kind of a back and forth, lower scoring affair as both defenses and offenses try to figure it out.
Well, yeah, because you have two new coordinators and two new quarterbacks. So it's and the first time out for all of them. And there's going to be the nerves and all that, the rust that you're going to see because I don't know how much tackling and live stuff that these teams actually do during camp. But yeah, it comes down to which team can kind of settle into, what they're trying to do offensively and defensively, the quickest and not have the catastrophic turnovers. But I'll go back to the offense. PJ has said a couple times. He said it, this year, last year is like the players show you what they can do, and basically saying when you said they figured out they couldn't pass the ball. Well, at some point, and that goes with the drops. It made me go with the quarterback missing wide open. Then you need to recruit better. If that's, you can't just, you got to find guys that can perform up to the standard that you have. And so I'm curious to see if they found the right quarterback and if the receivers can be a lot more consistent than we've seen them in terms of catching the ball and making plays for the quarterback. So there's a lot to be answered, I think, on both sides, but particularly we say Brosmer, but I think with the receiving core too. I mean, they have to show that they can be reliable. And I just don't think, other than Daniel Jackson, we saw that at all last year.
You are correct that you could feel good about that thought because we did not see that at all. So that was actually leading into my next question, Bernsey. With your intel, with what you know and what you've kind of reported and thought, how's it going to shake out? What do you expect behind Daniel Jackson, assuming he plays, which I know you've been pretty bullish on, that you think he's going to play, even despite that he hasn't practiced a ton, since fall camp started. Who are the other names that you've kind of settled in on that are most likely to get wide receiver 2, 3, and 4 on Thursday?
I would be shocked if Lemeke Brockington and Elijah Spencer aren't the other two starting receivers and 3 wide receiver sets. But I'd also say make sure to keep an eye on Christian Driver and make sure to keep an eye on Jamison Gears. Donald Driver's kid, when he has been on the field, and that's been another issue here in the spring and in the fall, when he's been on the field, he's provided something that they don't have there outside of Daniel, and that's a very explosive player, someone that can take a jet sweep, someone that can really get deep over the middle of the field. So we'll see how they use Christian Driver, and then Jamison Gears as well, someone who's patiently waited his turn behind Brevin Spann-Ford over these years, but if it's not going to be Daniel, I'd imagine some combination of Elijah, Christian Driver, Lemeke Brockington, and Jamison Gears.
Defensively, safety is the other thing we need to answer, right? For who replaces Tyler Nubin and what that looks like. I know there's been about 6 guys that they've kind of named and rattled through those names. Bernsey, you've written about all of those because that's really the big defensive question they have to answer, right? We've talked a little bit about who they added secondary-wise. We know about their defensive line. Nubin was a feast or famine kind of guy. Obviously, he had some spectacular plays a year ago. Ends up being their all-time interceptions leader. But by his own admission, got caught taking the cheese, as PJ Fleck likes to say, a couple of times. That had them losing against Northwestern, losing against Illinois. So most likely replacements here. And how do we feel about a defensive secondary that will probably be? I'm sure they'll be tested as well. I'm sure Mac Brown knows that they're going to try to stop Amari and Hampton, and Max Johnson probably wants to sling it a little bit.
I think at the low end, you're going to see 4 safeties rotate in, and it wouldn't shock me to see 6, which I want nothing to do with 6 different safeties seeing the field.
Yeah, that's.
But as much as it is about,
what if one of them's Coy though? Let Chipper have Coy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I would imagine one of them would be Coy Parrish, but it's something to where if you see that many safety bodies, no one has really been consistent enough or just pulled away. And I think they're at the point at safety where they just need to see what happens when you put them out under the lights. Who's going to rise to the occasion? Who still needs a little bit more time behind the scenes to get ready? But they're just not going to know until Thursday night and then the next couple of Saturdays. So that's where the hope would be. Maybe Coy Parrish is one of them. I mean, we'll see what he ends up participating in on Thursday night. But I'll say you're going to see a lot of Kerry Brown, Coleman Bryson, Aiden Guzman, Darius Green. I feel pretty confident in those 4. And then we'll see if Coy can work into the mix, Chipper.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like if you're rotating 6 guys, you can look at 2 ways. Like, yeah, you're establishing some depth and figuring things out, but also like, okay, nobody's really stepped up and become the guy, So I don't know if that's always the best thing, but just, and I'm sure the coaches have a better idea, but just listen to the PJ, throughout training camp where he's talking about rotating guys and seeing this and seeing that and who's coming out with lights on. It's like, I think they're still trying to figure this out, and you can't really figure it out until you get them in a game situation and understand.
Right.
It's one thing to flash in a training camp scrimmage or something, but something entirely different when the stadium is full and you're going against another team. So I'm curious to see how this shakes out and they figure out, okay, this is our guys. This is this is who's ready for it. This is who we can count on. You always want to have depth, whether particularly along your lines, and you can rotate guys there. I think that's great, but they need to figure out who's their core guys that they're going to be able to count on.
Any final thoughts on the preview? We've kind of talked about this game since we started coming back to weekly episodes. I don't think there's a ton that we haven't covered that we need to cover, unless I'm forgetting something, Burnsy.
No, I would just say that if Minnesota wins this game, I'd be pretty surprised if it's not the main topic is Minnesota dominated up front. That'd be their offensive line, and that would be their defensive line. If both of those units do not play well, it's going to be pretty difficult to win. But, I mean, crazy things happen in these opening games. We even saw last year with the Tyler Nubin interception, which leads to Daniel Jackson's toe tap, which leads to the Dragan Kesich walk-off. Things are weird in the first game, but I would just say weather the storm through the first 20, 30 minutes, and then I would be surprised if in that second half, Minnesota's talent up front doesn't start to wear on North Carolina a little bit.
What you're saying is keep your oar in the water if you're at Huntington Bank Stadium watching the game. Is that a good way to summarize it?
While you're potentially wearing your poncho.
Yes. You might be in the water. Yeah.
For that gold
that's
out,
the other
by
thing,
the
too.
way, which I hope they can execute.
Gold out.
That's the other thing, too. Yeah.
Is it going to rain? Do we think it's going to rain? You're always the weather god here. I just kind of show up.
I think it'll rain.
I'm on the field. I'm the only one of us that's on the field. I do try to plan.
Let us know out there.
Yeah, I'll let you know. You guys can listen to the broadcast on the iHeartRadio app. It's free, downloadable, easy to use. Many of you are listening to this podcast on iHeart. I'm glad, though, you made the point, Burnsy. I think it's a good one that we have to make this time of year. As we know, if you're listening, I'm sitting here at the State Fair, and I always have the vivid memory of Friday before Labor Day, Chip Scoggins coming to the Star Tribune booth. I don't know, to join us or to just say hi or whatever it was. But it was the night after the Gophers opened the 2019 season against South Dakota State.
Yep.
And needed a fourth quarter fumble to get the ball back inside Jackrabbit territory to go ahead and steal that game. They were about to lose that opening game. 2019, if we remember, turned out to be a pretty decent year for the club. But I always remember Chip coming to the side of the booth, just right over here to my left. I can open the door and show you. It was right over that way. And saying, "Hey, Dan, how's it going?" Blah, blah, blah. Says hi to some people. Grabs me and goes, "What the hell was that?" And I go, "It was the first game, Chip. Things get weird." And then, by the way, they'd go on to need, I think we talked about this, they'd go on to need Tanner Morgan to Chris Ottman-Bell, 4th and 13 at Fresno. They'd go on to need Demetrius Douglas, 3rd and 30 to beat Georgia Southern. Like, it's not going to be clean. If it's clean and easy in any of this, even against Nevada and who is it, Rhode Island, Burnsy, that you always talk about, even if those are super seamless and clean, like, I'd be surprised because that's just not how it goes in the month of September. But hopefully they can piece it together enough for the opener, because it really is a nice tone-setting opportunity, to really get yourself into the season by knocking off a solid ACC team that obviously has a lot of pedigree with their head coach. And if you don't lose it, if you don't win it, the season's not over. But to get to where you want to go in terms of bowl eligibility and all these things, like, it's an important one. It's an important one. But everybody chill. Everybody just chill, because there's 11 games guaranteed after this one, where you are going to have more data and you are going to have more things to bounce off of. All right, have we disclaimed it enough, do we think?
That's right.
I think so. I think you did a good job there.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back from break here, we'll talk about one coach who will be suspended eventually if he ever comes back to college football, an update there on Jim Harbaugh, and one coach, shockingly, that is suspended for the opener. It's Iowa's Kirk Ferentz. We're going to break that story down. It's an interesting one. But first, we're going to pause to talk about our friends at Jack's Cafe, jaxcafe.com. They've been around forever. We've got the free parking. They've got the great menu. They've got the matchbooks. They've got the patio, which I hope the brook didn't flood with the deluge of water that we had coming out there. But they've been a great partner of ours for 3 years. We absolutely love going there, whether it's date night, whether it's a party. They've got room for you, 15 to 400. Sunday brunch is great. Happy hour before or after any game. We appreciate their support, and it's a great spot to hang out before, or at the 11 o'clock kicks, hang out after. But Bernsey, there's it's back. We're back in brunch season. The fall brunch swing is right upon us here, and I know you always love it there.
I do, and that's where one of our listeners, Dylan, actually tagged us in a tweet this week, went over there for, it looked like, his significant other's 30th birthday, which millennial be still my beating heart. They went out for a nice little anniversary date night. Whether it's brunch, whether you want to go to the bar, hang out, watch some football, or have a date night, Northeast Minneapolis, just in downtown there. Great ample parking, outstanding steaks, burgers, whatever you're thinking is on the menu, and Chip's already salivating over that creme brulee.
That's right. I know. And there is nothing better than when we get a tweet from someone saying, "Hey, we took your advice and came to Jack's Cafe, and you're right." Not that we're not surprised by that, because you're going to have a phenomenal time. But I had texted that to Bill, and he's like, "Yeah, I walked them to their table, and I'm glad they enjoyed it." And so anytime you do that, say hi to Bill, tweet at us. Let us know that you took up our suggestion and you had a great time there, because that makes our day and it makes Bill's day.
And speaking of Bill, he not only takes care of us on this podcast, he takes care of the audience. He's given us his tickets for the opener. He's given us the Jack's Cafe tickets for the opener. And I think we need people to just, retweet. We'll send out a tweet a little bit later in the show. Maybe we'll see if there's a code word or something that comes out of it, because Chip is always good for something. And somebody did come over, Bernsey, while Chip was here yesterday, and mention that he's a big fan of the pod, but his phone is only at 87%. So he didn't even want to say hi to Chip. I said, it's okay. He's not going to phone shame you, but he's going to tell you to take care of it. But make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Pair and Spare Pod, and we'll let you know how we're giving away those tickets for the opener. They're great tickets right in the end zone of the plaza there. They are fantastic, as Chip shows us that his phone is indeed charged, so he can go to jaxcafe.com and very easily make a reservation for the next time he wants to hit our favorite spot, as Bernsey said, in Minneapolis. All right, this surprised me, guys. This happened over the weekend, late at night, I feel like, Bernsey. And I think Scott Docterman, one of our favorites down there in Iowa, broke this story for The Athletic, that there'll be a press conference tomorrow. Kirk Ferentz is suspended for the first game of the season. I thought, what fake news world is this? The man of integrity, the guy that's been there for half a century, the guy who does everything by the book. And I'm not being facetious about that, by the way. I truly believe that. He's, I think, a rule follower. I think he's not one that, when you hear the anonymous coach surveys like, "Ooh, watch out what's going on in Iowa City." There's some crazy stuff there. Now, I don't respect his judgment when it comes to what is an invalid fair catch signal and what is not. I think he's lost his marbles a little bit there. But I was stunned by this, and then I stayed up all night trying to figure out what exactly happened. That's a little hyperbolic, but it was just so surprising. This is a self-imposed suspension, one game, for having to do with tampering with Cade McNamara, right, Bernsey? The guy who may or may not now be the starting quarterback when it's all said and done in Iowa City.
Crazy. I didn't believe it when I saw it either. I mean, I had to make sure there wasn't a Scott Docterman fake account going around to see that.
Imagine being the Docterman burner, the Scott Docterman burner account. I'd love to see that. One of the nicest guys, one of the classiest guys, one of the best writers who never says a bad thing about anybody. Imagine being the alter ego Scott Docterman burner account.
It's crazy times we live in that we even have to talk about it, but there's probably some crazed fan out there. But I was as gobsmacked as you to see that a self-imposed one game. So they must have thought, Iowa and Beth Getz and the whole deal, that they were going to be suspended at some point because of their tampering with Cade McNamara back when he was transferring. They contacted him technically before he put his name into the portal. It's the way I understand it, which I am absolutely shocked that Iowa is not doing things by the rules and recruiting compared to some of the stories that I've heard over the years. But yeah, Ferentz suspended for a 27.5-point home opener favorite for the Iowa Hawkeyes against Illinois State.
Oh, so you think that's by design? Are you hinting that that's by design, Bernsey?
Yeah, I'm, maybe they should have done it for the Cyhawk if they wanted any implications in this. But Chip, what was your reaction to?
Well, I didn't know anyone was getting suspended or getting in trouble for tampering. I just thought that was part of.
I know.
Has there been another coach suspended for tampering? I thought this was just kind of a.
We hear every coach right now talking about how everybody's tampering. Even
We're going to turn
Brown.
them in. We're going to turn them in. Yeah.
Mac Brown said Amari and Hampton got 4X offers to go run somewhere else. It's like, okay, and basketball coaches have been doing this forever. This guy's bought, this guy's paid for, this guy's cheating, and nothing ever happens. So I know. I agree, but not to interrupt.
No. You're right. You hear it anecdotally. All the coaches like, wow, this, they're calling our players, they're tampering. We know these schools are calling them, offering them money. And you always hear kind of the threats like, we're going to turn them in, blah, blah, whatever. I don't know if they do, if the NCAA just says, okay, we have 5 million other of these requests investing. I don't know how the whole process came down, but I think, is it right that one of their assistant coaches had a relationship with McNamara?
John Budmeyer.
Yes. When he was at Wisconsin, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense when you start connecting dots. But yeah, it's in the world that we live in college sports now, where it's like every person for themselves, and there's just rampant tampering going on. I was surprised that someone's actually being punished.
But here's where my mind went to: how much actual evidence did they have that they knew that they were going to be suspended?
Right.
Because if you're doing a self-imposed one-game suspension, there is, as the kids would say, receipts everywhere. That there must have been so much overwhelming evidence that there was going to be some sort of suspension handed down that Beth Getz was like, well, this is what we're doing, Kirk.
But it's interesting that this is how many months, year later after this? This is not
basically 18 months later. Yeah.
It's not like he's new on campus. I mean, this is something, I don't know if that's just how long it takes, or did somebody say, you know what, we're going to, bring it down now. But it's interesting that he's been there for this long, and now it's the punishment's coming out. But that's I don't know if this is going to be an outlier. I don't know if we're going to see more of these. They must have had enough that they got out ahead of the NCAA to self-impose it.
Well, it shows you how desperate that they were for a quarterback, that a guy who, by his own words, said in his press conference, which was definitely an intentional flex. In my 24 years, I've never had a level 2 allegation. Shows you how desperate he was, right? Shows you how desperate he was to basically go, I made a poor choice. Now he's not going, knee deep and here's what I did, here's why I did it, but he basically just straight up said, I made a mistake, and I apologize to everybody. And I give him credit for that part of it, because the guy we're about to talk about, we know will never do that, Jim Harbaugh, even though he has served, I think, one self-imposed suspension last year. And then I don't know if the Big Ten suspended him the second time when he missed half the season. I don't know. But you got to give credit to Beth Getz for jumping in there and going up against the king now a couple of times. She's got to feel pretty secure with firing his son, which he was mad about, and even kind of said, this isn't how I've operated for 24 years, but there's a chain of command and I got to respect authority. And now basically, Bernsey, I think you're right, saying we obviously know we're in trouble here. This is what we're going to do, Kirk, essentially. And I would assume they work together on this more than the Brian Ferentz situation, but she's not half stepping down there in Iowa City.
It's been quite the offseason, let me tell you, between Brian Ferentz, between their star receiver getting a DUI, over the summer between now, the self-imposed 1-game suspension. We're not even at the season yet. And to your point about even just Cade McNamara, he's listed as the starter for Illinois State, but he's got to go out and play well in these first couple of games. If by the time game 4 comes around, when they make the trip up to Minneapolis, he's going to hang on to those reins. So it's going to be it's been an interesting offseason in Iowa. And I know that whether you read anybody down anywhere near Iowa City, they're thinking double-digit wins, and that's the bar for them. So they've had a lot of distractions, in my opinion, this offseason in comparison to, say, the Gophers. We're going to see if that means anything at the end of the season with win-loss.
I'm going to say, Ryan, it doesn't, because Kirk always figures it out. But go ahead.
They'll figure it out. Well, and I think a lot of these preseason polls have them picked fifth in the Big Ten.
Yeah, which is really good, by the way.
Which is when you look at
really good
with uncertainty at quarterback, but that tells you how good they are defensively, and I think they're really good defensively. And you're right. It's like they just figure out a way to get to 9 or 10 wins or more. Their formula is timed. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I mean, their formula works, it'll be interesting to see in the new Big Ten when the West is gone and they're everybody's having to face a tougher competition. If that still works, but I think they're really good defensively, and if McNamara is what they think he is, they're probably right to talk about double-digit wins.
It's going to be interesting. So it's like the first time since like 1979 that Hayden Fry or Kirk Ferentz will not be on the Iowa sideline for a game. Yeah. I mean, just think about that. Yeah. Just think about that. Bernsey, that's so long ago. I wasn't even born. Like we get like you're at the age where it's still kind of normal. I wasn't alive for that. Chip obviously, probably remembers watching it on ABC. Yeah. I wasn't even born for that, Bernsey. I was not even on this earth the last time Iowa had somebody else lead them out of their tunnel there in the south end zone at Kinnick Stadium, one of your favorites, without Hayden Fry or Kirk Ferentz. I believe that's what you like to call, Ryan, cultural sustainability.
It is. I'd also say, who's a more privileged fan base, Iowa with 2 head coaches and since 78, or the Green Bay Packers with 3 generational quarterbacks?
That's right.
Much to Minnesotans like us chagrin, the bordering states. Yeah, as we say on the fan, right. They have everything and we have nothing. We're going through our 90th quarterback in that time frame and about 45th football coach. That's how we roll. All right, I know you guys are sick of this. I know the audience is sick of this. I'm not going to belabor it. I can't waste my life anymore with the Michigan thing, but we do have to bring it up. That the doc is out on Netflix. I did not get up at 3:30 to hate watch it. Unlike some Ohio State message board people who probably had an alarm set on their phone to watch the Connor Stallions Netflix doc. A couple of revelations. I think he said, he basically didn't cop to anything in any of the interviews, saying, no, I never sent anybody to advanced scout. Okay. You were just that interested in Gophers, Ohio State. The opener 3 years ago, you were just that fired up to see Gus Johnson that you wanted to come in person. But he also did, to Iowa fans' chagrin, presented a game ball, apparently, by Jim Harbaugh when they beat the Iowa Hawkeyes for the first time since 2005 in 2022. And the reason Connor gave was deciphering signals was the biggest reason why Connor got that game ball. Just for comparison, I've been given a couple of game balls by the head coach, PJ Fleck. 2 of them were because everybody got one that was in the traveling party when they beat Iowa and they beat Wisconsin. So that one to me is not very special because everybody got one. The only other time I got a game ball technically goes to my daughter, Jillian, who was born on game day 6 years ago now. So Jillian has a game ball for being born, not deciphering signals. It was nothing nefarious. That's the type of stuff. That's how PJ gives out his game balls, if anybody wanted some context there.
I thought you were going to tell me you got one when Gene Smith walked you off the field.
And then Gene Smith almost got kicked out at the big house the next week. Yeah. Trust me, I think Ohio Stadium's
standing up for your rights there. Yeah.
Ohio Stadium's on the schedule next year, I think, right, Bernsey? Don't they go to Ohio State? I am going to have the pass, and I'm going to Wayne and Gart that son of a bitch. Just show him exactly where I'm supposed to be. But go ahead.
I can already tell you. I know what I want people to say on Twitter if they want to enter to get those 2 free tickets.
I know.
Tag me how many game balls Guardsy has, because what a flex for him to turn this from Connor Stallions.
No, It's for
No,
context.
It's fine.
It's for
fine.
context. And
Yeah.
I happen to have one right here.
Yeah,
I happen to have. I was telling you, mine are not very special. I literally got one.
Do you have them on the? Do you have them on the mantle at the guard mansion?
Shelf is. We're thinking about a shelf.
Come on.
Jillian did have hers in her room, hanging in something, and mostly just to make her brothers mad because they are so bitter.
Oh yeah,
that they don't have.
This could be. Yeah.
It's a cool ball with their name on it and all that stuff. It was very nice.
Man.
It was a nice touch, I thought.
So what game was that?
It was the opener in 2018, whoever that was.
Oh,
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember the opponent. I don't.
Did
by the way,
go ahead.
If Heather wasn't in the room like she usually is, I'm guessing the head coach doesn't have that idea. So I think I was presented with the game ball thanks to Heather Fleck, not so much PJ. But maybe I'm short shrifting PJ because he is a thoughtful guy that way.
That's right. Did I see this right? Dan Wetzel, the great Yahoo writer, did in that documentary, did Connor Stallions, did they show a picture of him on the Central Michigan sideline? He said, that doesn't even look like me.
Oh, I don't know. But
yes,
I got to find the tweet.
He has not confirmed. I think that there's a photo of him in that doc holding the picture and be like, it's tough to say if that's me or not. I won't confirm it. It's just like, they are all so delusional at this point, and that's where the curious part is. By the time we record next, what is going to be the implications for Sherrone Moore is my question now. Because with the recruiting stuff that all went down, that came out, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, where now Jim Harbaugh suspended for a year because of it. Technically, Sherrone Moore could be, if the NCAA wants to, be a repeat offender, and if that's the case, in theory, the punishment is going to be more severe than if you were a first-time offender. So I'm going to be very curious to see if Sherrone Moore is suspended for how many games. I don't think it's an if he's going to be suspended for games. My question is at this point, how many?
Yeah. Well, and I think they got his text, independent of the recruiting, they got his text messages with the Connor Stallions.
Yes, which he's saying, by the way, I
can't wait for you to see him. Yeah, I can't wait for you to see him or whatever. Who knows what there's in it? But if there's any kind of evidence that he was aware of it, I mean, how do you deny that?
Yeah, you don't. It would be interesting to be suspended before you've ever coached a game. That would be, I think, a wreck. Now, technically, he has coached a game because he had to fill in for the old coach who was suspended
as not the interim. As not the interim coach. Yeah.
Yeah. When you finally get the job and you finally get the money and you want to kick it off against whoever they're playing, it's not Akron because that's Ohio State. Bernsey, I'm sure you know. They kick it off, and the new head coach isn't even there. They've got an interim head coach for game one. That would be something. But it is college football in 2024, so nothing would surprise us, right? Nothing would surprise us.
Never does anymore.
So keep track of that story. I'll try to not let it ruin my night or day or life because it's just so annoying. But, I'm going to have to move on from it at some point. At some point, I'm going to have to move on.
Never spoken about again. Never talked about again. It's
crazy that I feel like I'm bucknuts.com, an Ohio State message board. Like, especially given that I was almost arrested by the Columbus Police Department just, 9 months ago or whatever it was. Lastly, last couple of minutes, I love, by the way, how triggered Bernsey was about my game balls. Now I'm definitely going to go home tonight after the fair, and I'm going to take a picture of both of them for the Parent to Spare audience.
I won't be able to hear you because I'll be knee deep in T-Pain and Ludacris in a few hours.
Yeah, we got to get to that. But it is opening weekend, which is great. I love that the Gophers play on Thursday. I love that there's games on Friday night, including at least one Big Ten team. And then we've got a full slate of Saturday and a Big Ten team on Sunday. And it might actually be the most interesting matchup with a longtime Big Ten rival USC in Las Vegas taking on LSU. It's a 24th ranked Trojans against the 13th ranked Tigers of LSU. What do you guys, I guess I'll just limp in with this. What are you most looking forward to with this full weekend college football slate?
Tennessee.
Yeah, we know that. Besides that, speaking of cheating, besides that,
no kidding.
This is the guy who picked Florida State in my college football playoffs. That lasted about a week.
Well, they could still put themselves back in.
Yeah, not if they don't get better quarterback play. They won't.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's what I'll say. You could wake up at 10 a.m., turn on the 11 a.m. game, and guess what? You can now watch Big Ten football until 1 a.m. Because of those West Coast teams. You got 3 options at 6:30, and you have a 10 p.m. kickoff between one of Chip's third favorite teams, Weber State against the Washington Huskies. So as you're settling in after you're trying to figure out what's going on with the Vols, Chipper, you can turn on, I think it's on BTN, which 10 p.m. BTN, there we go.
That was a big part of this expansion to get in 3 TV windows, right?
Yeah, well, that's like
morning,
4.
afternoon, and night. 4, yeah.
Yeah, that's 4.
Yeah, all day long. Yeah. Well, I do love that that there has been this shift to having more marquee games the first couple weeks. It used to be just like the first couple weeks of college football is like, you're playing nobody and there's no big games and it's just everybody's just. It was basically their preseason, right? Now, because of the playoff and the importance of scheduling, we have these 3 or 4 marquee games each week early in the season where, you'll see Alabama play somebody big or you'll see, USC and LSU. I love the fact that you have some big games here right off the bat.
How about the poor guys at the Big Ten Network that have to stay through all those games? I mean, do they do a couple of shifts now? I mean, what do we do? Do you start with Revs in?
What you're getting.
Yeah, I know they've got. I know they brought some Pac-12 network people in. Like, do they get the night shift? Do you make them stick around? Because it's basically 2 8-hour shifts now. If you want to roll through on the BTN, the post game show is not going to hit till 3 a.m. Final drive. Like, how are we even going to know when the final drive is? The final drive is going to be Sunday morning
with his morning coffee at that point.
I know.
Yeah, that's Go for Football Sunday time, Bernsey. That's you and me on the fan at 8 o'clock. We can't be competing with Final Drive, the first live version.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you hinted at it. I hope we see you Thursday. Don't get in any trouble tonight when you're here for Luda and T-Pain, you millennial. I
just hope I have a voice for the pregame show on Thursday night. I'll have an ample day to recover in between, but I'm going to be I'm a huge T-Pain guy. 2000s R&B, Be Still My Beating Heart. So
where are you sitting tonight, Chip? Where's your tickets? Are you in the pit with Bernsey?
I don't know that I know one T-Pain. T-Pain?
No.
I'm sure if it came on the radio, I'm going to Google it. I'm sure I probably heard one, but
what about Luda? You big Luda?
I know who he is. I don't. I know I probably heard some of the songs.
Bernsey,
I do like Ludacris. Yeah.
Bernsey, don't FaceTime me because I'll probably be sleeping, and I don't need you to interrupt my sleep. Okay, it's a long week or so out here at the fair
show. This thing's going to be going from like 7 to 9:30 by the time.
Yeah, but it's been a long few days. Will you just either live stream it at Ryan Burns I'm on Twitter, or just film it for me? Film it. I sound like Chip. Film it. Record it on your phone when he plays "Welcome to Atlanta," please.
Oh,
because if you wanted to know what Hillcrest Hall in Iowa City sounded like in 2002, when I was hanging out with Brian Ferentz and Chad Greenway, and hanging out, I mean, they were down the hall with Benny Sapp and Brad Banks and Fred Russell and all those guys.
Benny Sapp.
Yeah, there's a whole nother podcast for Benny. Great guy. That's what Hillcrest Hall would have sounded like. Welcome to Atlanta in about 2001, 2002. So feel free to help out your 42-year-old brother from another mother and get me a little Luda tomorrow.
Well, for the record, I got a diverse palette because I think a few weeks ago I was at Foo Fighters, and now I go from Foo Fighters to T-Pain. But I refuse to be one of those people at shows who videos it or like puts it on an Instagram story or Snapchat story.
Way to draw the line.
Nobody wants to see the grainy, incredibly loud version.
I do.
But maybe just for you.
Yeah.
I'll try to take a little bit of video.
Have you ever been to a state fair show?
No.
Oh, have you, Chipper?
No,
I went
never.
to my first one. Speaking of child of the 90s, Counting Crows a couple of years ago, which
was,
by the way, a high school reunion. I walked right in and saw like 9 people that I knew. It's a wonderful setting. It's just a tremendous setting for a concert. When the sun goes down, you got the Ferris wheel off to the right. It really is. I was in my feelings that night. I've talked about it on the fan. I was in my and we're at the age now where all the bands that we like are playing the grandstand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's the bet. Like, we don't have to fight 18,000 at Target Center or, God forbid, a US Bank Stadium show. We can just go to the grandstand with like 5,000 people. It's great. So enjoy yourself, Bernsey. Bro tank or no bro tank?
Well, I'm obviously got to come out and see you while you finish up 3 to 6:30 tonight. So which one would Chip? Should I show up in the bro tank? No bro tank? It's not going to be incredibly hot anymore.
No,
absolutely bro tank. I'd be disappointed if you don't.
And if you need a KFAN hoodie, they're for sale right around the corner if you're a little chilly.
You mean I can't get that in my form of payment between the pregame and the postgame show for this fall? Can't get a
Seems
little
like the
Dustin Guard
Wi-Fi is
discount?
getting a little spotty. Now that we're talking
All
about
right.
this, the Wi-Fi is getting a little spotty. I think it's probably a good time to sign off. Check out the Pair and a Spare pod for Burnsy's Twitter contest for the pair of tickets to the opener against North Carolina right there in the end zone. A great spot to watch the game. Jack's Cafe's donated those again. We appreciate Bill for his support there. You see it on the scroll at the bottom of the YouTube channel, jackscafe.com for your reservations, whether it's a date night, tailgating, whatever you want to do. They've got it for you. Great food, great meals, great salads, great appetizers, great desserts, great parking, and just great people at Jack's Cafe. Boys, we'll see you Thursday when the college football season kicks off for the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Can't wait.
Let's do it.
Tell a friend in your life that we're here. Subscribe to us all on the YouTube channel and the podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcast. And we will talk to you next week on the Pair and a Spare podcast.